This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863.
Welcome to this episode of Money Sense. I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci. The new three-legged stool in life as it pertains to total wellness consists of financial wellness, physical wellness, and behavioral wellness. Money Sense was created to help our viewers begin to create a plan for their own financial wellness. Studies have shown that financial stress can lead to illness, reduced productivity, and increased distraction. This series brings together experts who take a common sense approach to helping people better understand a variety of financial wellness topics. Each week, we will meet and hear from industry leaders who will explain the basic concepts you need in order to find your own sense of financial well-being. This week, we will be covering identity theft.
Hi, I'm Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller. The Office of the Attorney General serves the state of Indiana in a number of ways, but particularly in the area of consumer protection. What I'd like to talk to you today about is the problem of identity theft, what you can do to protect yourself, and if you are a victim of identity theft, what you can do to clean up the problems that often chase people who have been victimized by this crime. The Office of the Attorney General is seeing a lot of increase in this, and it's now moved into the top 10. This is now 8 among the top 10 complaints that we're seeing, so it's rapidly rising, and it really requires people to be more on guard and protect themselves. There are a lot of ways that people can have their identity stolen. Sometimes it's as simple as losing your wallet, but often it's things that come to you unsolicited over the internet. So with the solicitation of information, people should be on guard that it may be someone trying to steal their identity. There are a number of ways to try to prevent yourself from becoming a victim. The Office of the Attorney General often recommends that you have a security freeze, something that keeps people from accessing your credit records and opening up additional lines of credit. But there's other ways to protect yourself, including just keeping track of the information that you send out to people. The Office of the Indiana Attorney General has an identity theft unit that helps victims walk through the process of restoring their name and their good credit. File a complaint by going online to indianaconsumer.com or calling the number on your screen.
Today, my guests are Sybesma and Paul Ferron. Michelle is a noted speaker and former victim of identity theft. She used her experience as a victim combined with business savvy to act as a lifetime advocate for ID theft prevention and understanding. This paved the way for congressional contributions, law enforcement support, work with the Indiana Attorney General's ID theft unit, and nationwide outreach. Paul is the Chief Marketing Officer and Director of Business Development with Ascent Business Solutions. In addition, Mr. Ferron is the Senior Product Manager for LibertyID.com, the consumer-centric, subscription-based service that provides a fully managed recovery and restoration solution to the victims of identity theft. Welcome. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Anthony.
This is an exciting topic to discuss. I know I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So maybe, Paul, maybe you can open this up for us, and can you define what is identity theft?
Well, Anthony, thank you for having us. Straightforward, identity theft is a crime. Okay. It's that straightforward. A little bit more detailed definition, it's the unauthorized use of a person's private, non-public information for fraudulent or deceptive purposes. Likely financial, but it many times goes deeper than financial. It can get into an employment fraud, medical fraud, children ID fraud. It is all-encompassing, and it's very insidious.
Anything you would add to that, Michelle?
I think I agree completely with what Paul had to say. One of the things that I frequently point out is it's so much greater than the public perception of credit card fraud. That is one aspect of identity theft, but only one aspect. And as Paul touched on, there are many different dynamics that can happen. It's a
great point. So I'm sure our viewers are thinking maybe what I'm thinking, which is, okay, we've heard of identity theft, we know it's a problem, but it's not going to affect me. And how big is the problem?
Well, it's enormous. Last year, it was over $18 billion in losses.
$18 billion in losses.
$18 billion with a B. Wow. Over 13 million people were affected. The reality is, if there are two parts of this. There's a breach of your information, and then there's a theft or a misuse of your information. Some of the breaches that we've heard about in recent months involved credit card. That's credit card fraud. That's not identity theft. But it can be, as Michelle said, the tip of the iceberg. An identity thief wants as much information as they can about you. They're really looking for your email and password. And that's the most hideous part about it, because they can go in and now change things about you. Apply for loans, change records of on your medical information. They can obviously take over your bank accounts and a number of other things very, very quickly and very remotely. But it's a growing problem. It's growing each and every year, and there really doesn't seem to be any stop in it whatsoever.
That's interesting. So one of the most important things for a thief to have is your email address and password.
Much more so than your credit card. With your email address and password, now they can go in and do more things. For example, the tip that we often point out to people is people are more likely to use their email address and their password, the same password, for their banking account. 72% of the time, that's more likely. So to get that information through your social program, whether it's Facebook or something of that nature, and then to use that to go into your banking account, now they can change all sorts of records on you.
Very interesting. What are some of the common mistakes with regards to ID theft risks? There's maybe some of those common misconceptions out there today.
Common misconceptions are, I had a fascinating conversation with someone just yesterday, a generation younger than I, shall we say, okay. And she said, well, you know, I just kind of presume that identity theft is going to happen to me in my lifetime.
Really?
And I thought, wow, if that is the perception, then we are in a really interesting state. We've raised the awareness that identity theft exists, because 20 years ago no one had heard of identity theft. No one understood even the beginning stages of what it meant. But today it's become such an understandable term that people just presume it's going to happen, and that's a really dangerous thing, because when you have a perception that it's just going to happen anyway, then you aren't as guarded, and you may not necessarily understand that when it does just happen, the depth and the scope of what can occur when it does. So it was a very enlightening conversation, shall we say.
Very interesting, and I think maybe part of that is, maybe 20 years, you fast forward to today, with the technology that we use in our day-to-day lives. We talked a little bit before the show about information overload and just the volume of emails that we all get. It's probably that the internet's probably paving the way now, and our use of the internet, to maybe more significant exposure and risks. Would that be a fair comment to make?
It's a fair statement, but some people believe that the internet is the only place that you can have your identity stolen, and that is a big misnomer as well. I hear the senior or the silver generation, if you will, they say, well, they just don't use the internet. That's how they avoid identity theft. Well, there's a little flag on your mailbox, and it's red, and when you put it up, it screams, "Come by and shop for identity thieves."
Good point.
So if you are mailing paper checks to be safe because you don't trust the internet, you're actually putting yourself at risk in a different type of way. Emails are an entry point in, but there are things like, when you choose to go shopping, you have a debit or credit option. Well, your bank will operate that card in either capacity, no matter whether you select debit or you select credit. But when you choose to use debit, which is the default in many instances, and put in your PIN, you are then giving those vendors, if you will, the opportunity to have both of those, and the responsibility
to capture that PIN,
to maintain that information in separate places. If they do, wonderful. If they don't, they now have your PIN and your credit card number.
Are there any regulations to kind of force that vendor to keep it in separate places?
There are wonderful breach regulations that put the onus on the vendor to actually behave as they should, but does that mean they will? Usually they don't address it until after a breach has happened, that oh gee, we didn't do quite what we should have.
And going back to the mailbox, I never thought of it that way, because not using the internet because they're afraid of being a victim of identity theft, using, you know, snail mail, if you will. Well, there's no password even. There's nothing to protect you at that point because that check is just sitting in your mailbox where anyone could mosey on by, take it out, and now they have access to your personal private information.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look at it this way. We have given up our security for convenience. In order to be able to go and function the way we want to do, and live the way we want to live, and have the records at our disposal, we have given up the ability for those to be secured. 20 years ago, if you wanted to get my medical information, you would have had to break into a specific office in my doctor's home and go in there and find that record, and oh, there you go. Well, now all of that is data. All of that has been digitized. Right. All of that is warehoused or housed or stored on servers of various places. To get that information now doesn't require a physical act. It's actually an electronic act. And that act can take place or happen from the third bedroom of a home in Yugoslavia or Romania or Vietnam, anywhere around the world. In one situation, they found a person who had absconded with over $50 million worth of other people's money, hadn't spent it at all, but had absconded all this money, and they found he was a 16-year-old boy in his father's home living in Brazil.
Oh my.
To him, it was a video game.
Right.
So for him, it was just the challenge of moving that around. He had moved beyond Xbox 360, and now he was into really trying some different things. So this information is digitized, and it's accessible to these people that are leading the charge. These criminals are really leading what we're having to do in defending.
So it sounds like we're always having to be almost reactive, and it's almost difficult to be proactive. So a question for you guys then, because that's fascinating. I mean, a 16-year-old from his bedroom in Brazil.
Yeah.
Is there like a typical profile for you know, what would that profile be for an identity thief? I mean, is there a general description or profile?
I'm really glad that you asked that, Paul, because there is a perception that you can envision. When we talk about identity theft gang rings, people think, depends on their generation, West Side Story, right, or Bloods and Crips. These are not the kind of gangs that we are referring to. These are groups of people who have gotten into financially desperate situations. I know that you know people in your everyday life who are not as financially secure as they would like to be or once were, and they turn to less than savory behaviors, and they can buy and sell information on the internet very quickly, and it may be in Brazil, it may be in a foreign country, and it may be in the home next door to you. Mm-hmm. So you can't become intensely paranoid. You have to become day-to-day behavior smart. Okay. If there's a piece of paper with your name on it, shred it. It's not going to hurt anything. Consider it environmental. There are behaviors that you can have. When I order a pizza, if they want my credit card number, I say, are you writing this down or are you putting it right into the machine? Because it's worth asking.
Great
and
question.
if we ask our vendors and purveyors if they have good practices, they're going to be more in tune with making certain that they do.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is it's our information, our personal information, and we have to hold people accountable and make sure that they're stewarding it well.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
So let's flip that now. So we talked a little about maybe that profile, which now it sounds like it could be 16 to 60, and we could be at risk from anyone really at the end of the day, domestically, internationally. But is there a typical type of target that these thieves are looking to target?
Well, I'm gonna break what you just said a little bit. It's not 16 to 60. It's actually pre-birth. We're finding out that children are 52 times more likely to have their identity stolen than adults through Social Security numbers. And one of the reasons for that is the Social Security number, when it was set up, was not meant to be a security. It was meant to be an identifier. I'm
going to pause you there for a second. I just want to make sure our viewers heard that. A child is 52 times more likely to be a victim of identity theft. 52 times. That's mind-boggling.
It is, it is. And many times children's identities are being stolen before birth because the numbers are sequential.
Right, pre-generated.
Second of all, they're being stolen while they're in parochial school, elementary school, well before college. In fact, when was the last time you ran a credit report on your children? I do so 3 times a year.
Okay.
But you should, and everyone should. because it's not until someone applies for a student loan or a car loan or a cell phone or an apartment of something of that nature after high school that they found out that their identity was stolen many years before, and now they have to explain the foreclosures, and at that point it's far too late. So it goes before 16, well before 16, but it includes small business owners, includes the retired folks who have so little time to recover from identity theft. It really is all facets of society. If your information is out there, it's digital, it can and will likely be used against you. In fact, the scariest percentage or statistic that I've heard is if you are a victim of a breach, meaning some of your information has been leaked, whether it's through a department store or an employer or some other activity, you are now 1 in 3 chance of having your full identity stolen. Stand a 1 in 3 chance of having your identity stolen. It's significant. It's not a matter of if, it really is a matter of when, and you have to be proactive.
Wow, 1 in 3.
One of the most proactive things that you can do as a consumer is if you have a credit report, and you have to have established credit in order to have a credit report. So you can check your children's, but it may require you to write away and present who you are to validate that they don't have a credit report, which is a good thing. But as an adult, to do the security freeze. Indiana is blessed with the ability to do that for free via the Attorney General's website, and as he mentioned earlier, but because of legislation. But having a security freeze can prevent new credit from being issued in your name that you do not want. And the credit is the big one. That's the one that, they're all significant, obviously, but the credit is the one that's happening at the most rapid rate. And having a freeze can really help prevent that.
So speaking of being more proactive, and you mentioned you 3 times a year pulling your children's credit reports. What sources would you recommend to our viewers? Are there inexpensive ways of doing that, easy ways, free ways, in fact, to do that? What advice can you and resources can you share with our viewers today?
Well, there are any number of things that you can do to reduce your target, and we try to help our customers and show them the various things that they can do. It can be as small as not returning that plastic hotel key to the front desk, taking that home with you and shredding it. Those are small things, but what we want to do is we want to see if we can reduce the size of the target on your back for your identity theft. So there are daily things that you need to do to be proactive, and far too long of a list to really get into substantive detail right now.
But let me pause you there for a second, because that's definitely a direction I want to go in, but more specifically from just the credit monitoring, pulling up your credit reports. I think I speak to a lot of people, and they'll typically share with me, how do I pull up my credit report? I mean, can I? Is it expensive? So are there any sources, just to basically, to your point, like you said you do with your children, to monitor your own credit or your children or your spouse's credit, in fact? Well,
you're entitled once a year to a free credit report, as Paul and I were talking about earlier. Once a year for each of the 3 credit reporting, I always call them bureaus, I'm old school, credit reporting agencies. You're entitled once a year to a free credit report. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is to set a little reminder every quarter, every 4 months, to check and rotate which one you use. So you're continually allowed to have a free credit report, if you will, within a reasonable period of time. And with that coupled with the freeze, which won't affect your credit in a negative way at all, and you can thaw it at any time if you need to issue real credit. It's time to refinance the mortgage, do those kinds of things. You can lift the freeze. But to just stay cognizant and familiarize yourself. So many people that I've spoken to over the years have never even seen their credit report. They didn't know, and they didn't know until it was too late.
Yeah, the first time they see it is when they're trying to take out that mortgage or that home equity line of credit on their home, right? Or get that new car. So and that's too late.
And it's simplified a lot over the years, but it's a complicated thing to learn all about the credit reports. So it's better if you understand them when they're healthy, and then if something happens, it's easy to spot something that's not yours.
Interesting. So we talked a little bit about the different generations of targets. Are there any unique multi-generational perspectives that at the different generational levels people should be, our viewers should be aware of?
Well, I love the fact that Paul mentioned the generations yet to come, because protecting our children is an incredibly important aspect. I had a gal call me sobbing because her 16-year-old could not get a driver's license because she already had one. And so it's a real challenge. But understanding the perspectives with the millennials and whatnot, just starting to form their credit education is incredibly important. If they understand, they're going to have a better handle on it. They're going to realize what not to post on social media, what not to tell the world. But each generation has its own distinct aspects. Generation X has had a lot of credit. They've job changed a lot. They've also credit changed a great deal in their generation, whereas the baby boomers and the silver generations, if you will, may not have had as many credit issues. They have a long credit report in terms of detail and thoroughness of information, but everything falls off after 7 years with the exception of a few major things like bankruptcies and whatnot. But it will clean itself up over time. But each generation needs to be aware of how to get access to that. You can do it many ways. You can do it online easily. Go to, for Indiana residents, you can go to indianaconsumer.gov.com, as was mentioned earlier. But there's always a way to educate yourself in your desired medium, depending on what your generation is. Just figure out what it is.
And we've talked about that a lot on Money Sense. It's about being proactive and taking the first step. Really taking control of your financial future. Talking about, I love that. You talked about the millennials a little bit. We've talked a lot about on the show already technology. It sounds like and feels like to me the use of Wi-Fi is just increased. So with the increased use of Wi-Fi, is there now increased risk as well? What are things that our viewers should be aware of? Specifically those that are utilizing social media. They have their tablets, they have their laptops, they're sitting in a cafe.
Well, it's interesting, as Michelle said, with regard to Facebook and other social networks, on Facebook are many of the answers that an identity thief is looking for. Mother's maiden name, hometown, first dog, those types of things. All there, where you are, where you live, easily to pull that information together. So it's presenting that roadmap of, here's who I am, you can put it together. And synthetic identity theft is enormous. Taking a little bit of your information, a little bit from someone else, and creating a new person, if you will. So it's very prevalent. Directly, though, with regard to Wi-Fi, I think people need to be more understanding that Wi-Fi connection, whether it's a coffee shop or an airport or even a hotel, is really a wide open azimuth into your information, into your computer. That Wi-Fi connection saying that you're at XYZ may not be that person. It could be someone else that set up a phony Wi-Fi system. So you have to be very careful of the information that you are accessing when you're on your computer or your tablet or your smartphone. Best solution is to use the app on your iPhone or your iPad, for example, if you're accessing your bank, rather than a portal, because that can be faked. So there are some of those steps that you can take. But if we look at Wi-Fi as being an open gateway to your computer, and you want to guard that, I think that's a good reminder to take some precautionary steps.
Great counsel.
And if you work from home, you must remember your Wi-Fi connection is your responsibility from a security standpoint, and what you're sharing over it may be your business property, and you have a responsibility to make sure that that's secure.
That's a great point. We have about 1 minute left. So with that, bullet point out for us, for our viewers today, what are things that they can do immediately to prevent being a victim of identity theft?
Number one, know that you can't prevent it. You have to be prepared. You have to take precautions. You need to reduce the target on your identity for its attractiveness and its ability for someone to steal it. That's number one.
I would say that the importance of being continually cognizant of this, it's kind of, I always joke that once upon a time everyone looked at Louis Pasteur like he was crazy. He suggested there were these things called germs and you needed to watch them. You can't become intensely paranoid. You can become conscientious and take ownership. That is your data. You have a right to politely ask, is this you know, what are you doing with my data? Do you really need this number from me? Is this an optional number to include Social Security, or is it just a form on a box?
Right, no, wonderful. Great counsel, great advice. Thank you guys so very much for joining me today. I know I feel better informed. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you had as much fun as we have. We look forward to seeing you next time for a new episode of Money Sense. I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci, and remember, we always try to make finance fun.
This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863. This program was produced by Lakeshore Public Media and Centier Bank.